Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am a gardener in Zone 8A in North Texas. If this is your first time joining me, welcome. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you guys about the tomato season that almost wasn't, and then towards the end of this video I'm going to go over the top 10 varieties of tomatoes that actually did do okay for me this year despite some of the challenges that I faced. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and start today's video discussion. I have zip ties out here to work on some tomato maintenance while I talk to you guys about what went wrong with my tomato season. I am also going to try to insert pictures, maybe right here, as we talk about stuff today, so you can kind of see how the season started out, which was beautifully, versus where we are now. So the season did start out beautifully. All of the tomato plants were really healthy, they were thriving, they were growing, and then we started facing a pretty bad rodent issue in May, and we went from no rodents to an absolute disgusting, I don't know if infestation was the correct word because it was outside, but issue. We had a bad problem seemingly overnight, and a friend of ours was actually who discovered that we had the problem because he came over for dinner and he wanted to see the garden, so we were outside and I'm showing him around, and he walked down this tomato aisle right here, which is the one that's closest to the house, and he saw something scurry across, and he said that he thought that it was a rat. And I was like, oh my goodness, I hadn't seen anything. At that point we hadn't noticed anything being eaten or anything like that, but I started, paying attention. And I was coming outside in the evenings, like right whenever the sun was setting, and I had seen some young, they weren't like juvenile, I call them teenager rats because I don't think that they were like fully grown, but they weren't babies either, and then like a big, who I called the big papa rat, scurrying down, and I saw them a few times, and so we started putting out different things to try to get rid of them. We tried deterrents and those did not work, so then we started looking at lethal options, and trigger warning, if you have anything against killing any sort of animals, please do not feel obligated to watch this video. This is how we had to handle the issue because they were eating the food that I'm growing for my family to eat. Typically, I am a live and let live person. I don't kill spiders or snakes or anything like that. But in this instance, because it was rats and they carry diseases and they were eating our food, we chose the lethal option. So we set out traps, and it took several different go-arounds with different things within the traps to find what worked the best for us. A lot of websites were saying use peanut butter, use bird seed, use this, use that. We did try peanut butter. That was the very first thing that we tried, and we did end up unaliving, so to speak, one female, and then the bird seed did not net any. Then we switched to strawberries, also did not net any. What they were eating in the garden was all of the tomatoes. Every single plant that had tomatoes was under attack from the rats. There were some plants that I grew tomatoes on that I didn't actually get any fruit off of for us because the rats ate them all. So it was quite bad. It was I had 48 tomato plants, and they ate tomatoes off of all 48 plants. It was very bad. Then I became really stressed out about the issue, so I did call an exterminator. We had seen some droppings in the attic, so I was heavily concerned that they were making their way into our house. So I called the exterminator, and he confirmed that they were rat droppings. However, it was like a couple things. So he has some stuff around that is in enclosed bait boxes for them that our dog cannot get to. We have not seen any rodents that were unalived by the bait boxes laying around in the yard or anything, so the dog it hasn't been an issue for the dog at this point. And he did assure me that it was like a pet safe something. He said he's a pet owner as well, and he didn't want to put something out here that he thought would harm his own animal, so he assured me that what he has in there will not hurt our dog or owls or bobcats or whatever else might be after rodents. So we have those bait boxes, we have traps. One thing that was suggested that I try because the problem was so bad. When I tell you the problem was so bad, I saw rats out here daily for a few weeks, and it wasn't even like the same rats every time. It was so bad. One method that was suggested to me was a 5-gallon bucket filled halfway with water with sunflower seeds in the bottom, and that did catch 3 rats. However, it didn't unalive them quickly, and so that seemed to be the least humane way to go about getting rid of them, and it was really difficult for me to put them through that, so we no longer have that out as an option. We only have the bait boxes and some traps out. The traps that are out do have sunflower seeds in them because they do seem to like those. We do not know where the rats came from. We kind of have a theory. Behind us there's the field, and there was like a large burn pile. It was quite large, and it had been there for at least a year, and then they burned it, and shortly after they burned it was whenever we started seeing them all around here. So we had a theory that they left the burn pile and came into our yard seeking somewhere to live and moved under this tool shed right here, because that's where we would see them run off to whenever they saw humans out here. And so because we do live in a pretty rural area, there's always going to be the possibility of rats coming into our yard, especially because in this rural area they are building subdivisions and stuff. They're adding on to the city services department behind us, and building that bigger, because since the town is growing we need more police and fire people to help out with that, which is great. I'm definitely not against having, more city services or whatever. So we understand that there's always going to be the possibility of rodents getting into our yard. It's just the nature of things. Even in suburban areas, our old place, we had to deal with issue 2, and that was in the middle of suburbia America. So this is something normal that most gardeners have to go through. Anybody who grows food is probably going to have to deal with something eating their food at one point or another. A lot of people have to deal with deer, rabbits, hornworms, obviously, all of those different things. So we are doing the best that we can in order to get to solve the problem. And I haven't seen any critters as I loathingly refer to them, as I haven't seen any critters out here in about a month, so I'm hoping that the issue is at least slowed down. There hasn't been any tomatoes for them to eat, and they don't seem to be interested in anything else in the garden. They did get one poblano pepper, and one buena mulata pepper. That was really the only two peppers that they got. Everything else was tomatoes. So because there hasn't been any tomatoes because it's been too hot, I don't think they have any current interest in the garden right now. However, since it should be cooling down soon, tomatoes will hopefully be setting fruit again. They may come back. So I am still being diligent about, checking everything in the morning and in the evening whenever I'm out here, doing my garden maintenance anyway. So that was the biggest problem that we faced as far as why we almost didn't have a tomato season. I would say that the rats probably got 70% of the tomato harvest that should have been. Now, I did obviously harvest a lot of tomatoes. I have dehydrated 2 quart jars of cherry tomatoes to use throughout the winter season. I made a lot of salsa. I do have a gallon of tomatoes frozen in my freezer to use for salsa at another date. So we did get tomatoes. It just wasn't what we would have gotten otherwise. The other issue that we faced this summer that almost wrecked the tomato season was actually the weather. Weather tends to be the hardest thing to control. I mean, you can't control the weather, but it seems to be the hardest thing to garden around. And while we did get a lot of rain early on in the season, which kept us out of drought tendencies for a long time, it got very, very hot in July, and we were at 110 degree temperatures in July for up until yesterday. Yesterday was the first day under 100 degrees since very early July. It was 98 for the high, and just to kind of drive it home how hot it has been, everybody that I know was excited about 98 degrees compared to 105, 109, 113 temperatures that we had been seeing. On Friday alone, today's Monday, on Friday alone, we set a record for not only the highest temp, but the number of 100 degree days in a row. So it's been miserably hot. It has been dry. There has been no rain since June, I would say. In June we had the weird tornado that wrecked a lot of people's homes. Or the same friend that pointed out that we might have had an issue had to have his entire roof replaced because of what was possibly a tornado that came through here. So it's just been, on top of the rodents and the non-stop heat and the lack of rain, it's been a very difficult season gardening all around, but especially for the tomatoes. So a lot of varieties that I planted with the full intention of preserving as sauces and canned diced tomatoes and salsas and all of those things. It just did not happen because of those two factors, mainly the rodents. They seem to have preferred the darker variety tomatoes the most, which sounds very, very strange. But I had Queen of the Night tomatoes and I had Black Beauty tomatoes. They ate every Queen of the Night tomato. I didn't get a single one, and then the plant succumbed to the heat, and now I'm not even going to be able to try again until next year, which is fine. The Black Beauty tomatoes, I'm going to try to find a picture to put in down here, but it probably had like 25 or 30 tomatoes on it, and we got one, and that was because I harvested it early and put it in my windowsill to ripen just to make sure we would get one. So it's been quite difficult managing all of these things. I'm just going to zip tie this up here. However, there were tomatoes that, despite the circumstances, did pretty well for us, this one being one of them. So I do have a list of the top 10 varieties for us this year that I do plan on growing again next year. So I'm going to read it off of my phone. So let me just grab that real quick, and I will try to put in pictures of each variety on here. So if you feel like you want to grow those as well in your own gardens, you'll know what they look like and what to look for. So first I want to give an honorable mention to the Sart Louise tomato. I grew it last year. The flavor is amazing. I love it. It's so sweet and so juicy, and it's so pretty. It's yellow and it has purple shoulders. Last year it did better for me. This year there were rodent issues, and then I think it also had spider mites, but let me see what I wrote down for the review. So Sart Louise. This beautiful yellow and black variety is fruity, juicy, sweet, and all around delicious. The fruits get quite large and are excellent eaten fresh. This one is honorable mention because for 2 years in a row it has been one of the earlier varieties to succumb to spider mites. Okay, so just as I thought. Despite the little critters, I will continue to grow it for the flavorful and beautiful fruits. So even though it's prolific early on, it does also get sick early on because of the spider mites. So until I learn how to manage spider mites, that's just going to be an issue that tomato faces. So now we go ahead and continue into the top 10. Number 10, Black Beauty. This tomato is a stunner on the vine, ripening to an absolute gorgeous black and red. It is juicy, flavorful, and everything you want in a tomato. This one comes in at number 10 simply because rodents went after this variety more than any other I had in the garden. And by the time I got the issue under control, there was only one tomato left for me that I harvested early and ripened inside. That one tomato was almost life-changing as far as flavor goes. I will grow this one every year, knowing I may have to put a cage around it to make sure I get all of the tomatoes from it. Flavor is 12 out of 10 easily, and I wish I could have had more than the one that I did. And if it was that good ripened inside, I can only imagine how good it was outside, and that's probably why they went ham on it. They were like, okay, this one is good. I'm sorry, there's ants around here, and they're biting me. Okay, number 9, Black Strawberry. I actually have my black strawberry is down here, and there is actually a fruit on it getting ripe. So keep that in mind as far as why this one made the top 10 list. It's been 110 degrees or however hot for several weeks, and it's still ripening. So it doesn't seem to mind the heat as much as other varieties. So this tomato, when I wrote this, is actually still setting fruit in 105-degree temps and has held up to rodents, spider mites, and hornworms. The fruit ripens to a beautiful pink and black, and the cocktail-sized tomatoes are sweet and flavorful. This tomato is great in salads and in fresh eating applications. While not super prolific, it does produce late into the season, so you get multiple harvests from the plant. So if you are one that likes to eat tomatoes fresh and don't really care about preserving them, that one is definitely a variety that I would recommend. A lot of people say that they don't like the flavor, but I guess maybe because it gets so hot here, the flavors are really concentrated, so I actually like them. Okay, 8. Giant Crimson. This tomato is an all-around great tomato. It gets pretty large while still retaining an excellent flavor, perfect fresh or in sauces and salsa. This variety has a great backstory, so growing it is a wholesome experience in itself. So if you aren't familiar with the Giant Crimson tomato, the seeds for it are sold by my gardener, and he actually found the seeds in a shadow box of like his grandfather's stuff. And so I think that the last time the seeds were planted before he brought it back was like 1931 or something. Some very old seeds. And he planted the seeds and then saved the seeds and then planted those seeds, saved them again and again and again until he what is the word that I'm looking for? Until the line was sustainable and ironed out and, a reliable plant. And then after that, he had enough to sell. So last year was the first year that he sold seeds, and I ordered a pack of the seeds So those were second year seeds, and I got several tomatoes off of the plant. It was actually right over here next to the tool shed. So they weren't attracted to that one. So maybe that one's rodent proof. I don't know. I don't want to do science on that to find out for sure. But it was a great tomato. We roasted it on like a comal for our salsa. It was amazing. So definitely recommend. Okay, so the next one is a Marglobe. This is a determinate variety of tomato that was quite prolific. While the flavor wasn't anything super spectacular, they added much needed depth to salsas and salsa. The plant stayed healthy and pest-free for its duration of growth, and several harvests were made from the plant. So the Marglobe for me, at least in my case, were probably, you know, like large cherry size. They weren't super large, but we did get several off the plant. It never had blight. It never had spider mites. It did have rodents munching on it, but I didn't use any of those. Inside, I threw all of those away, and it was great. Like I said, the flavor isn't anything like super spectacular, but it did add the much needed tomato flavor to all of the stuff that I used them in. Okay, so the next one, Texas Star. This is a large oxheart variety bred in Texas to handle the heat. While the plant did succumb to spider mites early on, the fruits were quite large and flavorful. These tomatoes are bicolored yellow and red and are fantastic in any application, fresh or cooked. Even while under attack from the spider mites, the plant continued to produce well into July. And that's true. The plant, actually the biggest tomatoes I got this year were from the Texas Star tomato, and the most big tomato, the larger tomatoes that I got were from the Texas Star tomato, and it was yellow and red. It tasted really good. It was juicy. It roasted really well for salsa. It was an all-around good plant other than the spider mites, but it seemed to fight them really well and continue to do tomato things. Number 5, Woolly Kate. This one was one that I was super excited to grow because it was a fuzzy tomato. And I grew it over there in the Vigo garden raised bed, and it did really well. So this fuzzy yellow and blue cocktail tomato was the thrill of the garden. Both the leaves and the fruit are fuzzy like a peach, so it was fun to feel the different texture. Now, even though it had the different texture, you know, to the touch, it didn't really affect the overall texture whenever you're eating it. Like, I thought that was going to be something that I was going to have to get over, eating a fuzzy tomato, but I didn't even seem to notice it once I was eating it. The tomato is flavorful, sweet, and juicy, and is best in fresh applications, salads, sandwiches, etc. If the plant was more prolific, this would be higher on the list, but I will still grow it again. Now, it set a ton of fruits early on, and then it just didn't set anything else after that. And I don't know if it was listed as an indeterminate variety and it actually was determinate, or if I should have fought against the spider mites harder to get a second bump out of it. But yeah, I only got that initial first run, and then I didn't get anything else. But the flavor was awesome. It was fun to come out and feel the leaves and the fruit both being fuzzy. That was fun. Even the kids enjoyed doing that. So I'm going to grow it again regardless of that. I'll just remember these are your early guys, and then, you know, pull them and make room for something else. So the next one on the list actually made last year's list as well, and this is the Evil Olive. This cocktail-sized tomato is so much fun. The plant is prolific, and the tomatoes are green and orange on the outside and red on the inside. So whenever you cut it open, it actually looks like it's bleeding. Like, the juice isn't red, but it looks like, you know, it had blood or something, because like the flesh is red. It's really cool. The skin is firm, so they don't suck on the splitting, and they hold their shape when cooked. No, the skin is very firm, so I don't recommend these for like eating in a salad, or if you just want to like pop tomatoes as a snack, because it's a very firm tomato. Whenever you cook it, it will still hold the tomato shape, so it's kind of fun to see it in like stewed applications, and you still have like whole tomato chunks. It's really cool. I prefer these roasted because the flavors are magnified beautifully, and they are excellent in sauce. So yeah. And then number 3 on the list, that's this plant right here. I'm hoping to get a second run of these. Costeludo genovese. These fun and delightful fluted variety with decent flavor. It is versatile as a slicer or a paste tomato and doesn't have a ton of seeds. It makes excellent sauces and salsa. So I used that on tomato sandwich and made a ton of salsa with it. Mostly what I use tomatoes for is salsa. We eat a lot of salsa here. And then number 2, Roselle cherry tomato. I actually have it still growing in the raised bed there. A prolific cherry tomato with amazing flavor. These are great straight off the vine, dehydrated, turned into sauce and salsa, and any other application. The plant was the last to get spider mites and never had blight. It's growing beautifully now. I cut off all of the spider mite affected stuff and I've been spraying it with a pretty high pressure water to try to keep the spider mites off, and it's doing fantastic. I'm probably going to get a very good fall run off of those. Very solid cherry tomato. And then the number 1 tomato for this year for me was the Barebones terracotta. Excellent size slicer, bold yet sweet flavor, beautiful color, all around a delightful tomato. Beautiful in salsa and sliced up fresh, no faults in this one. And this is a semi-determinate plant, so it will keep growing like an indeterminate plant, but it kind of has a set number that it's going to produce. I had it growing in between the raised beds, and every single tomato that I got off of it was just chef's kiss. It was, yeah, there's a reason why I put it at my number 1. Some of the tomatoes that were on my top 10 last year did not make my top 10 this year, simply because the rodents got to them before I could, so I couldn't fairly rank them on their flavor, productivity, all of those different things, which leads me to the tomato data analysis experiment that I was supposed to be doing this year. I'm going to put that on hold until next year because of the rat issue that I faced this year. It was really hard for me to gauge the productivity of each of the plants simply because there were so many different issues. I'm sorry, I was looking to see if this one made my top 10 and I didn't read it. Okay, no. However, I am going to talk about this one. So yes, the data analysis experiment for tomato will be put on hold for next year, and hopefully the rodent issue will not occur again, so that I could give the tomatoes a fair chance for them to tell me which ones are the best one for us to use fresh and preserved in any sort of fashion. But before I leave, I do want to give very high remarks to this tomato right here, which is also this one right here. I have 2. This is the Texas Star. Sorry, this is not the Texas Star. This is the Texas Wild cherry tomato. These were discovered essentially in a ditch somewhere in South Texas. Somebody saved the seeds and cultivated them, and now we're able to purchase them. And the plant goes absolutely bonkers. It went sprawling in 18 different directions. I think that I didn't put it on my top 10 because once it starts sprawling, hence the name wild, it does get very hard to control and maintain. But most of the cherry tomatoes that I was able to preserve came off of these 2 Texas wild cherry tomato plants. The rest of them were Roselles, and then a few other lingering ones. But this plant is very, very prolific. If you have the time to be able to maintain and train the plant and, you know, keep it from sprawling in 18 different directions, I definitely recommend it. The tomatoes aren't like super overall flavorful, but if you do like preserving cherry tomatoes, this one will definitely give you enough to preserve something with. But yes, it was a challenging tomato season. I know that it was a hard gardening year for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Some people had too much rain, some people had not enough rain, some people had really hot temperatures, some people had a combination of some of those things. I had some of those things, and then rodents. I'm definitely not saying my gardening year was worse than anybody else's, so please don't take it as me turning it into a competition. I am definitely sympathizing and empathizing with the struggle that we all had this year as gardeners and trying to grow food for our families. I do take this entire season as a learning season. One, how to get rid of rodents if I face the issue again. 2, hopefully how to, prevent them a little bit better. 3, I I did learn some lessons as far as companion planting goes and what I'm going to do differently next year. And then 4, season extension, trying to get, you know, fall runs and all that stuff going. I do hope that you guys enjoyed at least the top 10 lists from this, and go ahead and feel free to like and subscribe and do all the YouTube-y thingies. I'm trying to upload once a week right now until I get my feet under me again as far as work goes, but until next week, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I know that was repetitive. My apologies.